Welcome to week 5. This is your introductory PowerPoint. This is the second week that we're looking at art and photography in the 19th century. Our major questions are, first, how do photographers imitate existing painting strategies in order to demonstrate the artistic merit of their work? The other major question is, how does the art critic, Charles Baudelaire, argue against photography as an art form? Our goals for the week are to identify the stylistic parallels between art photography and historical paintings. And we are also going to be analyzing Baudelaire's Modern Public and Photography essay as an argument against art photography. Here's your module. I recommend reading Baudelaire's essay first, as that's the subject of the discussion, and then you'll see that I have 3 different links with artworks and biographies for Adolphe Braun, who's one of the photographers we'll talk about, and then the other one, Charles Negre, I have 1 link for him. The graded assignments are a discussion, and then you're doing a rough draft of another major writing assignment. Many artists by the 1860s were using photography to help them with their work. So for example, here is the British artist Dante Gabriel Rossetti's painting of Jane Morris in a blue silk dress on the right. On the left is a photograph that he used to help himself plan that composition. We also have photographers taking photographs of existing artwork. It's hard to understate how huge this is for the practice of art history. So before photography, if you wanted to study the history of art, you basically had to travel all over the world to see the artworks because there were copies made, but they were copies by human hand, not like a photograph that's an exact replica of the painting or the sculpture or whatever is in front of you. So here we have a photograph of a painting of Holbein's Dead Christ. The Dead Christ painting is from the early 1500s. And now, because photographers are making images of them, people all over the world can now study these older paintings. You also see the development of photographic societies. So here are a few of them in France that are explicitly dedicated to the idea of art photography. And they really want to have their works exhibited. So one of the artists involved in this is Charles Negre. He actually trained as a painter, but he starts making calotypes in the late 1840s to help him with his paintings. Eventually, he focuses exclusively on calotypes and making art photographs with calotypes. So here's an example of one. This is young girl seated with a basket, and a lot of what he did is he tried to intentionally imitate painting from the Baroque era. So on the right is this Spanish Baroque painting by Murillo, The Little Fruit Seller. And you can see that on the left, Negre's young girl seated with a basket really is very similar. You have a child in a similar pose, also like a similar interesting composition. It's really like very thoughtfully composed in terms of like this white wall here that's breaking the composition into thirds, the white of her shirt and her veil centering us on the image here. I mean, it's really a very lovely photograph. It's made on a calotype. Another photographer that's working in a similar matter is Adolphe Braun. He's actually, we just talked about him, he's the one that's making these documents of old paintings, but he also is interested in making his own photographs. So in 1855, he publishes a book of photographs of flowers. The goal for this book was to create images that could be transferred to printing blocks for fabric and wallpaper designs. And so it's kind of very technical and commercially inclined. It's super successful. He actually wins a gold medal at the Paris Universal Exposition in 1855. It's awarded to him by the Empress Eugenie. So I've said that it's commercial, but honestly, they're beautiful photographs. So here's one of them, and you can just see that it has such lovely textures and the way that he centers the image and has these like light blooms kind of creating these circular patterns across the surface of the image. I mean, they really are very lovely photographs. So another thing that he does is he makes still lifes. So on the left, this is a still life of a hunting scene. Similar to Negra, he's imitating Dutch Baroque paintings here. So on the right is a Dutch Baroque still life. The subject matter is very similar. The way they're composed is very similar. Another thing that's similar, look at the size. So this is something that's kind of cool about Brown. He wanted to make photographs like this that were big enough for people to collect and display in their home, sort of like paintings. So most people couldn't afford a painting, but maybe they could afford a photograph. And so now they get to have this like really lovely photograph of a hunting scene on their wall. Anyway, so he is thinking like an artist, but he's also has some commercial interest as well. You also have artists like Mailander, who is using composite photography to create narratives. So this is an example of what's called spirit photography. This is the haunted lane. And so people enjoy buying photographic scenes like this as well. Okay, so around the same time, Charles Baudelaire, who is a art critic and translator and poet, he actually translates Edgar Allan Poe's work into French. He's friends with all the major intellectuals and artists, but he hates photography. Writing about it, he says, "It's obvious that this industry, by invading the territories of art, has become art's most mortal enemy." And his major beef with photography is he feels like it's not creative, that it is just imitative, and both in terms of like, well, it's just imitating what's in front of the lens, but also this idea that they're not creating anything new. They're just copying these existing ideas, these existing compositions. Anyway, you're going to be reading excerpts of this essay this week and applying it within your discussion.
This is your discussion for the week. What I want you to do is read Baudelaire's essay, The Modern Public and Photography, and I want you to think about why he doesn't like photographs and what are the particular things that he's concerned about. In order to develop those ideas, I've started 2 threads below with some comparisons of photographs with paintings, and my goal is for us to think about both in terms of creativity, but also in terms of technique and art media, why Baudelaire is so anti-art photography. So this one is Adolphe Braun's still life of a hunting scene, and then this one down here is Charles Negra's young girl seated with a basket. You should make this post before Wednesday, and then I'll update it on Thursday with another question. But your post should be visual analysis or pull some quotes from Baudelaire's essay that you think would support his claim.
Your written assignment this week is the rough draft of the major writing assignment Arguing for Art Photography in the 1850s and 60s. These are the 2 photographs that you'll be using as your example. Adolphe Braun's Still Life of a Hunting Scene on the left and Julia Margaret Cameron's Mrs. Herbert Duckworth on the right. I've made a separate video explaining that assignment, and I recommend that you go over to watch it now.